Every week, another note about my dog. Every night, his walls rattled with bass and shouting. I thought I had no power, until one night changed everything. My name is Greg Baxter. I live on the third floor of an old brick apartment building just outside of Milwaukee. It is nothing special. Walls are thin, elevators are slow, and the heating hums like a dying lawnmower when winter rolls in, but it is home. At least, it was supposed to be. I moved in with my dog, Jasper. He is a mutt, part terrier, part shepherd, maybe some lab mixed in, but no one really knows. He has got these ears that never agree on which direction to face, and eyes like he understands more than he lets on. Jasper does not bark much. He is a quiet dog, anxious like me, always sniffing the corners before settling down. We fit together that way. The day we moved in, I made a choice. Be the kind of neighbor people never complain about. You know the type. Keeps their head down, music low, always scoops the dog poop, and says thank you when someone holds the door. I kept Jasper on a strict routine. Morning walk at 6:30, always with a leash, always with extra bags. I even picked up other people's trash sometimes, just in case someone was watching, just in case anyone had something to say. Turns out, someone did. His name is Trevor Daniels. Unit 3C. Lives directly across the hall from me, and if I had to describe him, I would say he is the human version of a car alarm going off at 2 in the morning. Loud, smug, impossible to ignore. The first complaint came within a week. I had just gotten home from work, tired from a 12-hour shift. I had barely gotten my shoes off when I heard it. 3 knocks, sharp and fast. Jasper was curled up by the couch, dead asleep. I opened the door, and there was Trevor, standing like he was already irritated. He launched into it. Said my dog had been barking all afternoon. Said it was disrupting his workflow. Used that word exactly. Workflow. Said he had an important video call, and my mutant furball ruined it. I was too surprised to push back. I just nodded, apologized, and said I would keep an eye on things. But here is the thing. Jasper does not bark unless something is really wrong. That day, I had left him with a doggy calming treat, a white noise machine running, and blinds drawn. Still, I figured maybe a truck backfired or a delivery guy knocked weird. I did not want trouble, so I adjusted. No more hard shoes inside. I started carrying Jasper up and down the stairs just to avoid the sound of his nails on the floor. Switched to a softer collar. Even bought a portable crate so I could take him with me on longer errands. But Trevor kept finding things to complain about. Too noisy. Too messy. Too much pet smell in the hallway. I installed an air freshener. Vacuumed the shared carpet. Smiled through clenched teeth. Then one Friday night, something happened that shifted everything. Jasper was curled up next to me on the couch, and we were half asleep watching an old documentary when the walls started vibrating. Not from a truck or thunder, but from bass. Deep, pulsing bass. My picture frames rattled. My ceiling fan wobbled. Jasper shot up like a firecracker went off. I stepped into the hallway and realized it was coming from across the hall. Trevor's unit. And that was when I realized something I had never wanted to admit. Maybe the noise complaints were never really about Jasper. Maybe they were about me. And I had just been letting it happen. But that was not even the worst part. That came later. I stood in that hallway for a solid minute, just listening. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, every thump coming from behind Trevor's door. Music so loud it was bending the air. You know that kind of noise you can feel in your ribs before your ears even catch up? That was it. I glanced around. No other doors opened, but I knew I could not be the only one hearing it. My building might be old, but sound travels like gossip in here. Someone had to be pissed. I just figured they were waiting for someone else to say something first. I knocked on Trevor's door. Not hard, just enough to be heard. Nothing. Knocked again. Still nothing. Then the door opened a crack, and a wave of weed smoke hit me like a wall. A girl in a gold sequin top peeked out, wide-eyed and confused, like she had no idea people actually lived here. Behind her, I could see strobe lights, actual strobe lights, bouncing off the walls. Someone was holding a red Solo cup up like it was an Olympic torch, and a guy in a Hawaiian shirt was trying to dance with a full slice of pizza in his hand. The girl just blinked at me. You lost. I asked if she could turn the music down just a little. I was calm, polite. Told her I had work in the morning. Told her my dog was scared out of his mind. She gave this lazy smile, like I was part of some sitcom, and she was waiting for the punchline. Then she shrugged and said, "It's Friday, dude." Door slammed shut before I could say another word. I stood there for a moment, staring at that faded welcome mat that said good vibes only, and felt something twist in my chest. All this time I had been tiptoeing, trying not to be a bother. Meanwhile, Trevor and his buddies were throwing house parties like we lived in some frat row townhouse with no neighbors and no rules. And suddenly, I remembered something. 3 nights earlier, I had walked Jasper at midnight. He had been restless, and I figured a quick loop around the block would help. We passed by Trevor's door, quiet, of course, and I had seen something taped to it. A folded note. Probably a noise complaint from someone braver than me. When I walked back 15 minutes later, the note was gone. Of course it was. Because Trevor knew he could get away with it. And I started to wonder, how long had this been going on? I looked down at Jasper, still shaking a little by my feet, and guilt hit me in waves. I had bent over backward to be a good neighbor. Not for praise. Not even for peace. Just to live without problems. But the rules I followed? Trevor was above them. Or maybe he just pretended to be. And maybe that was my first real mistake, believing we all had to play by the same rules. But the night was not done with me yet. Because 2 hours later, the building's fire alarm went off. And when I stepped into the hallway, smoke was already spilling out from under Trevor's door. At first, I thought it was a prank. The alarm blaring, red strobe lights flashing in the hallway, and a faint trail of smoke curling out from under Trevor's door. It all felt too dramatic to be real. Like something you would see in a sitcom right before the punchline dropped. But this was not TV. This was my building. My home. And smoke was real. Jasper was already pacing in circles, whining. I grabbed his leash, threw on a hoodie, and stepped into the hallway. Doors were finally opening, residents sticking their heads out, confused, groggy, some with their phones up like they could tweet their way out of a fire. Then Trevor's door swung open. He stumbled out first, barefoot, shirtless, holding a vape pen in one hand and a kitchen towel in the other like he was going to wave the smoke away with it. Behind him, people poured out, half-dressed, dazed, laughing like they had just escaped a haunted house. Someone yelled, "The toaster's on fire." And another girl followed that with a slurred, "We made garlic bread." Like that explained everything. It did not. A guy in a tracksuit ran out holding what looked like a smoke detector wrapped in a towel. It hit me all at once. They had tried to disable it. Tried and failed. That smell? Not just weed. Something scorched and bitter. Burnt plastic. Oil. The kind of smell that settles in your throat and makes your eyes water. I shouted, asked if anyone had called 911. No one answered. Trevor was too busy trying to calm his drunk friends down, shouting over the alarm like he was the victim in all this. I pulled out my phone and made the call. By the time the fire department showed up, most of the smoke had cleared, but the damage was done. Hallways reeked. The fire chief told everyone the unit would need an inspection. Something about exposed heating elements, flammable materials, and improper use of kitchen appliances. No one was fined, though. No arrests. Just warnings and headshakes. And Trevor? He laughed it off. Stood there on the curb in basketball shorts and a backwards hat, fist-bumping one of the firefighters like they were buddies from high school. I stood across the lot, Jasper tucked tight against my leg, and watched as Trevor threw an arm around a girl I had never seen before, his voice loud and booming. Yo. These guys were chill about it. I thought they were going to find me, man. That was when I saw it. One of the building managers, standing off to the side, arms crossed, jaw tight. He did not say anything, just stared at Trevor like he wanted to. But nothing happened. No consequences. No accountability. Just another incident in a string of Trevor's Friday night misadventures. Later that night, early Saturday morning, I walked Jasper again. The hallway still smelled like someone deep-fried a battery. I paused at Trevor's door. A fresh piece of paper was taped there. I leaned in. It was a warning from management. Second violation. I looked closer. The first one was still inside my apartment drawer. From a month ago, it had been addressed to me. For a barking dog. I still remember how I felt when I got that first warning. Like someone had pointed a finger at me in front of the whole building and said, "He is the problem." The letter had arrived folded in thirds, tucked in a cheap, white envelope with the building's logo stamped on it. I opened it in my kitchen, thinking it was just another update about hallway maintenance or a reminder about laundry room hours. But no, it was a formal notice. A complaint had been made about excessive dog noise during daytime hours. The letter warned that any further issues could result in a fine, or worse, termination of my lease. I had read it 3 times, trying to make sense of it. Jasper had barked, sure. Maybe once or twice when a delivery guy knocked too loud or when someone slammed a stairwell door. But excessive? That word clung to me like a burr. It felt like a judgment not just on him, but on me. Like I was failing at something basic. So I responded the only way I knew how. I got quieter. I rearranged my work schedule so I could be home more. Cut my shifts. Took Jasper to daycare when I had long days. Started leaving calming music on for him. Some YouTube channel with ocean sounds and piano melodies meant to soothe separation anxiety in pets. I did all of that while Trevor threw full-on EDM raves 3 nights a week and smoked up the hallway like it was part of his lease agreement. The double standard was not just obvious, it was personal. Still, I stayed quiet. Part of me believed the system would work, that someone would see what was really going on, that Trevor would get the warnings, the consequences, that the building would step in. But that second violation taped to his door? It was dated 6 months ago, which meant it had been sitting at 2 strikes for half a year. And yet he was still here, still partying, still making life hell for everyone around him. That was when it clicked. The rules did not apply to Trevor because he did not let them. He made noise and ignored complaints. He got warnings and kept the music blasting. And me? I got a noise complaint and changed my whole life. That night, I sat on the floor next to Jasper, running my hand through his fur while the tail end of Trevor's party echoed through the walls. Someone was shouting. Someone else was laughing. A bottle broke. I pulled the warning letter from my drawer. Read it again. The words had not changed, but something in me had. And for the first time since I moved into that building, I started to feel something sharp in my chest. Not just anger, not just frustration, but a kind of clarity. This was not just about noise anymore. It was about how easily people like me get labeled, and how easily people like Trevor get away with it. The next morning, I woke up to find a smear of vomit outside my door. Jasper sniffed at it once and walked away like even he was too tired to care. There is a particular kind of silence that settles in after a long night of chaos. It is not peaceful. It is not calm. It is just heavy. The kind of silence that feels like it is waiting for the next mess to start. That was what Sunday morning felt like. The hallway smelled like beer and disappointment. Someone had left a half-eaten plate of nachos on the windowsill near the stairwell. A single flip-flop rested upside down beside the elevator, and no one seemed interested in finding its match. Just another weekend at the Daniels residence. I cleaned up the vomit outside my door with an old towel and a bottle of bleach. It soaked through fast, and I could feel the wetness seeping into my fingers even with the gloves on. Jasper stood nearby, tail low, eyes watching me like he knew something was off. He was right. Something was. I looked down the hallway and saw Trevor's door wide open. Inside, bodies sprawled across furniture like discarded clothes. Empty cups stacked on the kitchen counter. A girl with smeared makeup sat on the floor in a pink hoodie, eating cold pizza, eyes glazed over like she had not gone home in days. And there he was, Trevor, sitting at the kitchen island, shirtless again, sunglasses on despite being indoors. He looked up and caught my eye. Smirked. Raised his cup like a salute. That smirk hit me like a slap. He knew exactly what he was doing. I turned and went back into my apartment. Locked the door. Stood there for a long time, just staring at the knob. I could not ignore this anymore. Not after everything. The fire. The parties. The complaint that landed in my mailbox instead of his. The mess outside my door. The way people looked at me in the hallway, like I was the one making life harder. This was not new. It had been building for months. There were flashbacks I could not shake. Like the night I heard a knock at Trevor's door and opened mine just in time to see our elderly neighbor, Mrs. Winslow, walking back to her apartment with shaking hands. She had asked him to lower the music because it was after midnight. He had laughed and slammed the door. Or the morning someone left a note on the community bulletin board asking residents to be mindful of shared spaces. By noon, it had been torn down, ripped in half, and taped to the ceiling with the words "Cry More" scrawled across it in red marker. I had watched all of it unfold, and I had done nothing. Until now. I pulled out my phone and started typing. Not a message, not a complaint, something else. A timeline. I documented every incident, every party, every moment I had cleaned up a mess that was not mine, every warning I had received. I pulled dates from emails, photos from my phone. I even wrote down the day Mrs. Winslow moved out unexpectedly. She had lived here for over 30 years. When I finished, I had 4 full pages. But I was not done yet. Because that night, Sunday night, I heard something through the wall that made my stomach twist. Trevor was laughing, and he said something I will never forget. He said, "You can get away with anything if you look people in the eye while doing it." I did not sleep that night. Not because of the noise, though of course there was noise, but because of the silence inside me. Something had shifted. That line Trevor said kept looping in my head, like a broken record scraping the same groove. You can get away with anything if you look people in the eye while doing it. I laid there in the dark, Jasper curled tight at my side, and realized something I had not wanted to admit. This man was not just loud. He was calculated. Every shrug, every smirk, every chill out, dude was armor. He knew exactly where the line was, and he danced just close enough to it to avoid the fall. But I was not going to be his buffer anymore. The next morning, I walked straight down to the building office, timeline in hand. Our property manager, Sandra, was at her desk, sorting mail into plastic slots labeled with apartment numbers. She looked up when I walked in, offered a tired smile, the kind that says she has seen too much and is paid too little. I told her I needed to talk. She gestured for me to sit. I laid out the papers, explained everything. Dates, incidents, even a few short videos, muffled music bleeding through the wall, the fire alarm footage from the night it all smoked over, the time Trevor dropped a beer bottle in the stairwell and left the glass for someone else to find. Sandra read in silence, page after page, her mouth pressed into a thin line. When I finished, I said, "I do not want him evicted. I want the rules to apply to him, too." She sat back in her chair and sighed through her nose. Then she said something that nearly broke me. "I believe you, but you are not the first to complain." Apparently, over a dozen residents had filed reports. Some verbal, some written. One woman even threatened legal action after her child stepped on broken glass in the hallway. But nothing ever stuck. Trevor's lease was protected by a family connection. His uncle was one of the building's investors. That little detail had kept him floating above consequences for 2 years. Everyone complained, but no one pushed hard enough. Sandra leaned forward. "You keep your head down, Greg. I will do what I can behind the scenes, but just be careful. People like Trevor, they do not like being held accountable." That hit me harder than I expected, not because she was wrong, but because it made me feel like speaking up was a risk, not a right. I left the office feeling small, like the truth was not enough. But as I opened the door to my apartment, Jasper ran up to me, tail wagging, tongue out, totally unaware of how close I had come to giving up. That dog had done nothing but exist quietly in a world that judged him loud. And somehow, that gave me the push I needed. If Trevor was going to play his game in public, then so was I. That night, I posted the full story online. No names, no addresses, just a detailed account of what it is like to live next to someone who thinks the rules do not apply, while being blamed for every tiny sound your dog makes. I hit publish. By midnight, it had over 400 shares. And then the messages started rolling in. I never expected the post to take off like it did. At first, it was just a handful of comments. Strangers saying they had been there too. People with loud neighbors, double standards, dogs who got blamed for everything. But within hours, it snowballed. The post got picked up by a local community group. Someone shared it to a tenant rights page. Then someone else cross-posted it to a pet owners forum. By the next afternoon, I had over 1,000 messages. Some were from people just venting. Others were from tenants who lived in my very building. And that was when things got real. One message read, "Is this about Trevor in 3C? Because if so, I have video from the night he set off the fire alarm." Another one said, "We moved out 3 months ago because of that guy. You are not crazy. Management protected him." One woman wrote, "My daughter's asthma got worse because of the smoke. We filed a report. Nothing came of it." It felt like I had been living in a fog, constantly questioning whether I was overreacting, and suddenly the fog lifted, and there were dozens of us, all blinking in the same light. I created a shared folder and started gathering everything. Photos, time-stamped videos, audio recordings. Not just mine, everyone's. Even old security footage someone had downloaded before they left the building. It showed Trevor dragging a speaker system into the hallway during one of his parties, blasting music so loud it rattled the ceiling tiles. Someone messaged me anonymously with a PDF of building policy. They had highlighted the section about repeated disruptive behavior and leaseholder conduct that endangers health, safety, or peaceful enjoyment of other residents. Trevor had violated nearly every clause. I brought everything to Sandra again. This time, she did not just nod. She made copies. She called corporate. She looked me in the eye and said, "You may have just changed this building for good." But that night, things took a turn. At around 10:30, there was a knock at my door. Not the usual kind. This one was slow, heavy, deliberate. I opened it to find Trevor standing there, arms crossed, shoulders tense. He did not smile, did not smirk, just stared. He said, "You think this is going to work?" His voice was low, controlled. I told him, calmly, that I did not want to fight. I just wanted peace, fair treatment, respect for everyone living here. He looked around the hallway like it was some kind of courtroom, then leaned in a little. "You're not the only one with friends," he said. "Just remember that." Then he turned and walked away. Jasper was behind me, watching the whole thing with ears pinned flat. I locked the door, sat on the couch, and realized this was the first time Trevor had come to me directly, not to complain, not to mock, but to threaten. And maybe that meant something was finally working. The next few days were tense. Not loud, just tense. Like the building itself was holding its breath. Trevor's apartment went quiet, unusually quiet. No music, no smoke, no parade of strangers filling the halls. The party lights were gone. The door stayed shut. For the first time since I moved in, it felt like the third floor was under some invisible curfew. But silence from Trevor? That was not peace. It was planning. And I knew it. He was not the kind of guy to just sit back and let things slide. I had seen that look in his eyes, like someone who had just been caught red-handed, but still believed he would talk his way out of it. Meanwhile, the online post kept gaining traction. Someone emailed it to a local tenants union. Another reader forwarded it to a community journalist who ran a blog about housing injustice in the city. It even got reshared on a subreddit about neighbor horror stories. And then something unexpected happened. I got a call from corporate. Not the management office. Not Sandra. Corporate. A woman named Deidre introduced herself as the regional property manager. She said she had reviewed the documentation I submitted, as well as other materials that had been brought to her attention. She thanked me for speaking up, for advocating on behalf of our residents, and then said something that made me freeze in place. "We are terminating the lease for Unit 3C effective immediately." It felt unreal. She went on to say they were sending an internal notice to all residents explaining the decision, framing it as a safety concern and a breach of multiple lease terms. They would give Trevor 48 hours to vacate. Security would oversee the move out. I hung up the phone and just sat there stunned. After all the months of walking on eggshells, all the nights spent cleaning up his messes, all the guilt I had carried over the smallest bark from my dog, Trevor was finally facing consequences. But the part that stuck with me the most? The building was not silent because Trevor had calmed down. It was silent because Trevor knew he had lost the room. The neighbors he used to laugh in front of? Now they avoided his eyes. Some even nodded at me in the hallway. One guy slipped me a sticky note in the laundry room that said, "Thanks for standing up. We were all scared to be first." And that was what hit me hardest. It was never just about my dog. Never just about noise. It was about power, who felt they had it, and who felt too small to challenge it. But Trevor's silence would not last forever. And when he finally broke it, he would go out swinging. 48 hours came and went. And Trevor did not leave quietly. He waited until the final night. Tuesday, a work night for almost everyone in the building. A night when people just wanted to microwave dinner, watch their shows, and maybe forget they lived in a crumbling brick box with shared laundry and parking drama. But not Trevor. At exactly 8:30, the bass started. It was not just loud. It was deliberate. That same thumping rhythm he used to love, back with a vengeance. It shook the floors, rattled the ceiling fixtures. Framed pictures in my hallway tilted sideways from the vibration. Jasper whimpered and hid under the coffee table. The hallway reeked again. Weed, beer, smoke, maybe something stronger. It was like he had taken every rule in the lease and crumpled it into a ball just to slam dunk it on his way out. But this time something had changed. People started opening their doors. One by one, neighbors stepped out into the hallway. First, the quiet couple from 3B. Then the retired schoolteacher from 3E. Even the guy who always wore headphones and never spoke to anyone peeked out and muttered, "Again?" I did not say anything. I did not have to. Trevor had already said enough. A few of us gathered near the stairwell. Nobody yelled. Nobody knocked on his door. We just stood there, shoulder to shoulder, listening, waiting. The music cut off at exactly 10 o'clock. Like someone pulled the plug right out of the wall. 5 minutes later, security showed up. Two men in uniforms with clipped radios and corporate IDs. One held a folded notice. The other had a set of lockout tools. They knocked on Trevor's door. No answer. They knocked again. Then the door opened, and there he was. Trevor Daniels. Shirtless, again. Sunglasses, again. Grin gone. He stood there as they handed him the termination notice. I could not hear everything they said, but I caught fragments. Final warning already given. Violated terms. Legal removal within 24 hours if non-compliant. Trevor looked past them, scanning the hallway. He saw us. And for the first time since I had moved in, I saw something I never expected on his face. Not smugness. Not confidence. Not even anger. Just fear. Because this time, he was not facing a neighbor he could gaslight or intimidate. He was facing everyone. The door closed. Security stayed posted outside. And by morning, Trevor Daniels was gone. No goodbye. No smirking exit. Just an empty unit and a hallway full of tenants who finally realized what it felt like to be heard. But the story was not over yet. Because the next week, Sandra left something in my mailbox. Something small, but something that changed how I saw everything that had come before. It was a plain white envelope, no return address. Just a sticky note on the front that said, "Thought you should see this, S." I opened it at my kitchen table while Jasper slept beside me, chin on my foot like always. Inside was a printed copy of an email thread. Subject line, Re. Unit 3C Daniels. It was between Sandra and someone higher up at corporate. They had forwarded part of Trevor's file, complaints, violation records, even internal notes from previous managers. But what caught my attention was a line buried in the middle of the email. "We've been protecting Daniels due to family pressure. But this latest incident is indefensible." His neighbor in 3A compiled a more complete and well-documented report than our entire on-site staff has in 2 years. And then, one more line. 3A deserves recognition. I sat there reading that over and over. I was 3A, the quiet guy with the quiet dog who had spent months being blamed, overlooked, and dismissed. The one who had bent backwards to avoid conflict, only to become the target anyway. It should not have taken that much proof to be believed. Should not have required pages of evidence and sleepless nights to earn fairness. But somehow it still mattered. It made a difference. I folded the letter and tucked it into the drawer where Trevor's first complaint had once lived. And just like that, the drawer felt lighter. The hallway got quieter after that. Not just because the music was gone, but because people started talking. Nods turned into greetings. Strangers became neighbors. One woman even asked to meet Jasper. Said she had always been too afraid to knock because of that guy across the hall. And me? I stopped tiptoeing. I let Jasper walk freely again, nails clicking on the floor like applause. I did not shush him when he barked at squirrels or bounced with excitement near the elevator. I stopped worrying about being perfect, because dignity does not come from staying silent. It comes from standing up, once, firmly, even if your voice shakes and your hands feel too small to carry the weight. And when people try to paint you as the problem for simply existing, sometimes the loudest thing you can do is not raise your voice at all. It is to keep walking, with your dog at your side, and your head held high.